Welcome into episode 5 of the Fourth and Whinges podcast with your hosts Mark and Rob. Today we're going to do a draft recap from last weekend's NFL draft. We're going to talk about some of our favourite picks, some of our not so favourite picks, some teams that we think did well, some teams that we think balls did up, for want of a better phrase, and probably the Raiders. Then we're going to switch to talk about fantasy. We're going to have a bigger segment today than we've had so far. That's mainly because our Dynasty fantasy draft is coming up this weekend. So what we're going to do is we're going to share some of our kind of thoughts leading into that and share our positional rankings. But unfortunately, for those who listen to this, it will be coming out after the draft. So those in our league looking to maybe get a steer on some of this, it will happen afterwards. I think we wanted to do that because we wanted just to chat through it ourselves, but also it will be a good kind of reference point for later down the line. We can kind of look back and think and how bad we were and all the rest of it. So that's kind of what
Sean Bateman is Rookie of the Year, I think.
And then I think, Rob, you've got a couple, if not whinges of the week at the end as well. One or two things to maybe to have a chat about at the end, just as a bit of fun at the end. I'm going to try and keep it nice and short and sweet this week as well. No 2-hour podcast this week. So with that, I'll let you. Well, no, I suppose we should first of all talk about what happened pre-draft. We were obviously talking, Rob, in via WhatsApp or whatever, leading into the draft, and kind of the news and the rumblings were breaking about Aaron Rodgers and this potential position that he's putting himself and the team in, where he seems to desperately want out now, and that obviously was quite the buzz pre-draft, because it made us think, is literally Aaron Rodgers going to get traded during this draft? That's what I was hoping for, and it would have been
that'd have been amazing,
insane. What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
I mean, like you say, it was just absolutely fascinating. I think we also had the discussion about it being one of our favourite nights of the year, Super Bowl aside. There's just something about it that it's exciting and it's different, and so much stuff can happen. But yeah, the Rodgers thing was incredible when it started coming out. An hour and a half before the draft. I know Kutch had kind of called it about a week earlier, so shout out to Kutch there. And trying to figure out what the potential landing spots there were, all the whispers that it was going to end up going to Denver, which you could totally see. And I think then when Denver, just to skip ahead a bit, when they took Patrick Surtain, it was a bit, the Packers could do with a bit of support in the secondary here. I wonder if they're going to pick him and then trade him to Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers. But just the intrigue and the drama, and I know Brett Favre's come out this week and said, from sort of knowing Aaron Rodgers how he doesn't expect him to return to the team, which is fascinating. Jordan Love might be getting thrust in a bit sooner than possible, but they really don't seem to want to let him go, unless he retires and goes off to host Jeopardy or something as he's been doing. Then he's got options. He's not short of options, that man, and once he gets an idea in his head, he's pretty set on it, really. So
I think absolutely. I think those are all the things I was thinking. I think at the end of the day, he holds the cards definitely to a degree, in that if he is prepared to walk away, then he does hold the cards there. I'm still of the opinion that he'll be playing for them next year, but I don't know whether that is out of the fact that I don't want him coming to the AFC West, because obviously, like you said, Denver was one that's, I think, is the favourite for him to be going to. And also, I think
the Niners have inquired as well, hadn't they? But obviously that ship has sailed now.
But also randomly, the Raiders were like third favourites, which I don't really understand that. Again, is that where he's from? Because he's a California lad, isn't he? But I think that's where San Francisco, some of the San Francisco hype comes from. So, but obviously they don't even play there anymore. They're in Vegas now. So I really didn't get that.
I just think that if there's a player available, and it's a bit crazy, you throw the Raiders in there, because you've got Mark Davis as the owner, who takes after his dad and likes to mix it up and likes to get a bit of publicity and everything. John Gruden's box office in there, so you imagine John Gruden Aaron Rodgers working together would be quite exciting, I suppose. But
carnage, wouldn't it?
Well, it would. And let's face it, the Raiders don't really need the draft picks because they never do it with them anyway. So may as well just give them to Green Bay. Spoiler alert for later. Sorry.
So yeah, no, I thought it was crazy talk, and I was really thinking the way that it was leading in that we were going to see him trading, and like you said, when they took Satan and then passed on a quarterback themselves,
yeah.
Well, okay. I'm thinking if they've been in touch and something is actually penciled in, then they're going to have said we need cornerback or it's a quarterback. Surely it had to be one or the other. So for me, it was they either pick a quarterback or they pick a cornerback. If they picked a quarterback, I was thinking, well, it could still just be for Denver because they're desperate for a quarterback anyway. But then when they went cornerback, I was like, yeah, something's definitely in the offing here. And then obviously nothing happened. But that's not to say, though, because I think we touched on it on the night that they again, post June the 1st or June the 2nd, whenever the league year starts, it's probably when
it's a much better time, isn't it?
So if anything does happen, I think that's when it's gonna take place. But I am interested to see, because I just think from all I've heard about him is that he's a stubborn son of a bitch, and I think if he really doesn't want to go back and he's prepared to retire, then I can see that happening. I mean, it'll be such a shame. It'll be such a shame for the NFL because
it would.
He's the best kind of quarterback that I have kind of seen drafted and come through. Do you know what I mean? Peyton Manning, obviously, I wasn't really watching the draft and the NFL when he came into the league. So in terms of, I remember watching the draft, him falling in the draft, him coming into the league, sitting behind Favre, all that kind of thing. So he's kind of really my era, and for him to kind of drop out of the league, now, I think before his time would be sad, but such is the league sometimes.
As long as it's not another one of these stories that we have to listen to all off season, nothing ever happens to it. It's just something else that's just been taking up space also. A bit like the Mac Jones to the Niners chat that we had to listen to, and everybody was slating it. Then, oh, wait a minute, they didn't actually pick him. Oh, that was a waste of time. Great. I could have used that as a whinge of the week.
I was going to say, that would mean that the Rodgers to the Broncos might end up becoming a whinge of the week later down the line.
Well, yeah, sort of maybe in 6 months' time or something. Yeah.
So that was like I say, the key thing going into the draft, and then obviously the draft started. We watched, we both stayed up, didn't we, and watched the first round, and then that kind of killed me. I don't know about you. I had all the intentions in the world of doing round 2 as well, but it just didn't happen. So
same. Friday was an absolute write-off for me. Absolute write-off. I was a mess.
So do you want to kick off with the actual draft then, and sort of talk about some of the either picks that you liked or the teams that you think did well, and I'll kind of come back, and we'll kind of go backwards and forwards a little bit on that front.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the one that stands out initially, I think if we start in the first round and we can move on through, was what I was thinking. But I mean, the Chicago Bears, never thought I'd be uttering those words, but you and I were texting. We were like, somebody needs to take Fields. For me, Fields is arguably one of the second or third best player in that draft, really. And when he was falling, we were just, we couldn't. I think I said at one point, if the Panthers took JC Horn, I was going to go to bed. And then they took JC Horn, and I kind of wish I had gone to bed, but never mind. And then obviously the Broncos it got to, and then the Eagles trading up ahead of the Giants with the Cowboys. I think that might have helped the Bears move up, because in my mind the Giants probably would have taken Devonta Smith had he been there, and maybe the fact that he wasn't encouraged them to trade. But I mean, we've been talking all off season, not on the podcast, but with Girth about the Bears being sort of not too good, but just mediocre, and letting Dalton in to continue that mediocrity and never having a high enough draft pick to actually go ahead and get a quarterback. But I don't. Ryan Pace, the GM, I think he's been terrible recently, but fair play to him for making that trade up. And quite frankly, I don't care what you give up there. I'm not bothered in the slightest. You're at 20. You've got to get up to 11. You've got to take Fields. You made the move, and that's franchise altering for me. That them set up for the next 15 years potentially. Yeah. And then in the second round, they added to that, and they took Tevin Jenkins at tackle. So instantly, you've got your quarterback of the future. You've got his blind side protected. I just thought those first 2 picks, absolutely awesome from a Bears point of view.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. For me, I don't care what anybody says out there about, ranking their drafts. If you've not got Chicago at the top of your draft, you've got it wrong, in my opinion, because they were the one that, obviously San Francisco did it before the draft, so you kind of, I guess you could put them in the similar kind of boat. But for me, they gave away so much more, and yes, they were going to 3, but if in my mind, Justin Fields could quite easily turn out to be the best quarterback in this draft. I don't think he will, but he could. We know from what we've talked about before that just because we've had 5 quarterbacks go in the first round, none of them are destined.
Doesn't mean they're any good.
Doesn't mean they're going to, exactly. Doesn't mean they're any good. Doesn't mean to say they're going to come to anything. And just because Fields was the 4th quarterback taken doesn't mean to say he's going to be the 4th best at all. And for what, if you compare what the 49ers gave up to what the Bears gave up, the Bears was an absolute steal. I think they did so well. And if that was their only draft pick, I would have said they still had the best draft, because, like you say, it's potentially franchise changing. And we're, like you mentioned before, obviously a friend of ours who's a Bears fan, and we're just chuffed to bits because
I was grinning from ear to ear. I was so happy. I texted him at the time, just like, you moved up, you got your quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think sort of later on as well, they had a good draft. Looking further down the rounds, they picked up Khalil Herbert at running back from Virginia Tech. I know David Montgomery sort of finished the season hot last season, but behind him, what have you got? Tariq Cohen, who I'm not really sold on. I don't think it's great. So, a bit of value there later on. They got Daz Newsome out of North Carolina, another wide receiver, just to sort of add to after that depth. They also took a guard in the 4th, I think, who I don't know a lot about. But again, it just seemed like they were adding the right pieces. And, I think they'll start the season with Dalton under centre, but then it feels will very quickly come in to take over and manage it. And I think they've set themselves up really nicely.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I totally agree. I think they did really, really well. And potentially, you could be talking about, especially if things do happen with Rodgers, you could quite easily be talking about Chicago winning that division this year. If Rodgers doesn't play for Green Bay, that they're slam dunk for me.
It blows it wide open, doesn't it? Because Minnesota. I don't really know where they're at the moment. They're just a bit. They don't really seem to be able to get going. Obviously, the Detroit Lions are in a full-on rebuild. It completely alters the outlook of that division.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my kind of, like I said, Chicago definitely for me had the best draft. But if we're talking about outside of Chicago, I think we talked on about it midweek potential or even during draft that my second team this year, without a shadow of doubt, I'm going to be watching the Jets. I can't wait to see how they get on this year. They took 3 of my probably top 10 players in this draft. In quarterback, Zach Wilson, Elijah Moore, wide receiver, Michael Carter at running back. Absolutely love all 3 of those players. And then they took Elijah Vera Tucker as well.
Great pickup, just building on that offensive line. Took Mekhi Becton last year, who he was in the Pro Bowl, and slotting Vera Tucker in as well. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I thought they did really well, and again, I don't know necessarily anything, but they're 3 of my favorite players, and so I'll be all over the Jets this year, hoping that they do well, and also the keen eye amongst people will notice that they didn't pick just one Michael Carter; they picked 2 Michael Carters.
Who is helpfully known as Michael Carter II, so it works.
Yeah, one cornerback. I don't even know who he played for because I'd never heard of him. I'll be honest with you, but
he was a Duke.
So just a word of warning, although it won't matter because
it'll be too late.
It'll be too late. But I hope nobody drafts Michael Carter II thinking they're drafting Michael Carter. That's or maybe I do hope they do. I don't know. It'll be funny.
I kind of hope they do a little bit, but on the was it round 4 they picked up Carter? I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And I remember we were just texting, and then you just fired me a text. I think I was making my lunch and just said, "Oh my God, the New York Jets!" So I was like, "What? They've just taken Carter." I was like, "Yes."
It's definitely going to be one to watch, and I think that division's quietly turning into a really interesting division because having previously been dominated by the Patriots and then the Bills looking like potentially they might run away with it going forward from last year. I think what the Patriots did in free agency, although I don't think I touched on it before, I don't think it's too wise to be spending that much money so quickly. But overall, I think they've definitely got better. They've potentially got the next quarterback in Matt Jones. And then the Dolphins, obviously, have got so many picks and they've done so well over the last kind of 12, 18 months, just generally building that team that I think, again, it could be another really interesting division.
Well, yeah, just go back to the Jets for a second as well. They took a player in the, I think it was the sixth round. You'll forgive me this, Mark. Hamza Nasir-Al-Din, who was at Florida State. He was sort of one I was keeping an eye out for at safety. I think he could end up being a bit of a sleeper and a bit of a steal for them. Just from seeing him at Florida State, he was very highly rated there and performed really well. So I'll be interested to see how his career sort of progresses. I don't really know their team, their roster that well. They did take a safety sort of higher up, Jamie Sherwood as well. So you might not see the field too much, but I'll be interested to see how he does adapt to the NFL. And yeah, Miami, like you just touched upon, adding Jalen Waddle in, giving Tua that additional support, and also taking my top edge rusher, Jalen Phillips, I really liked as well. Give them a bit more of a pass rush and improve on that side of the ball. So yeah, that division I think's incredibly interesting because there's I don't think I mean the Bills will obviously be favourite, but yeah, it's open, that one.
It definitely is. And I think the other thing about, everyone, if anyone out there is expecting the Bills to be just as good next year, I would say just calm down there, because we saw a massive leap with regards to their quarterback situation last year. God, the name's just escaped me. I'm rubbish. Josh Allen. So yeah, Josh Allen. The
lesser of the Allens. Only the real Josh Allen is.
So yeah, his accuracy seemed to improve ridiculously yesterday, and I believe that will regress even if it's slightly. So I don't expect them to be quite as good next year.
We sort of saw a similar thing with Cam Newton in 2015, didn't we? Where he was just on point and he was on fire, and then obviously look at him now. Injuries obviously taking the toll, but he's nowhere near the player, and just a bit of a cautionary tale.
Yeah, I just think, again, he's just not the most accurate of quarterbacks. And although he did play really well last year, I think have they lost Cole Beasley potentially, or is it John Brown? One of those wide receivers.
John Smoke Brown went to the Raiders, which I was actually a fan of. I've always liked John Brown.
Absolutely. So I do expect them to regress a little bit. For me, that division again could be up for play. So I think a really good draft from the Jets. Anything else good that you liked?
I loved Cleveland taking JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Been practicing that all week. That was an absolute steal. Took him at 52. Obviously, in our exercise, we had him going 17 to the Raiders, or I had him going 17 to the Raiders. Good coverage linebacker, exactly what Cleveland needed. I thought they could have possibly taken him in the first, but didn't. They got help in the secondary. Greg Newsom the second instead. I think he's going to be a hell of a player. He'll be one that'll be, in terms of IDP, he'll be one that'll be high up on my board. For the rookie draft, I think obviously linebackers are a position you want to be aiming for a bit of a premium in terms of IDP. So I'll certainly be looking at him. I thought that was a great pick. Fields, he was an absolute steal. They were probably the ones that sort of stood out to me. Elijah Moore, what we've already covered with the Jets. Again, fantastic pick. I know you've got a couple of sort of later round ones you want to talk about. Do you want to mention those, please, before we move on?
There's a couple just in the second round as well, just very quickly. So obviously my top edge rusher, Azeez Ojulari, dropped to number 50 at the Giants. I mean, I mocked him to the Giants in the first round a few times. I think so. I've got the team right, but I've got the pick wrong, and so I think that's an absolute steal. I think there were some concerns there about his knees potentially, or a knee that kind of sprung out not that soon before the draft. So I think that's impacted him a little bit there. Christian Barmore as well dropped to New England. He's again somebody who I mocked to New England in the first round potentially, or certainly gave it thought at times there. So I think he was another great pick. Samuel Cosme, I like. He dropped. Washington picked him up. I thought that was good. And then sneaking in to the end of that round 2 was my kind of quarterback 5 in this draft, Kyle Trask, because I am a great believer that he could be, he could be something given a bit of time. He's played something ridiculous like 17 games at quarterback since like pre-high school or something ridiculous like that. Just he's just no real exposure there, and the one season he gets in at start, the 2 seasons, sorry, he gets in as a starter. He plays okay 2019 and then has a brilliant year in 2020. So I think potentially there, and that's Tampa Bay as well. So
he's landed in the ideal spot there, hasn't he? Absolutely ideal spot.
He will learn in theory behind Brady if Brady's prepared to do that. And in a couple of years he could have a Super Bowl winning team at his mercy. It's a really good spot. So I did like that. And then if we're talking sort of a little bit later, there was a guy who I was kind of tweeting from the Fourth and Whinges podcast on draft night and mentioned Milton Williams, the interior defensive lineman from Louisiana Tech, I think.
Louisiana Tech, yeah.
Who Philadelphia took. And if you look at and again, obviously you don't scout through combine results or like workout results, but if you look at his stats, he's very similar in stature to Aaron Donald. And you look at his stats and he is more athletic than Aaron Donald and tested better than Aaron Donald. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's who he is, but interestingly, Aaron Donald didn't play for like a top team, did he? Did he play for Pitt, I think, Pittsburgh?
Right, okay.
So he wasn't sort of like a power team or anything. And obviously he's become what he's become. And I think the potential's there for Milton Williams. I love him. There's some tape. And he's a little bit smaller. He's like Donald. Donald's not the ideal size. You wouldn't pick and build somebody like Aaron Donald to play interior defensive line. And Milton Williams looks very similar. And for me, somebody that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out. And then the other one in round 3 that I really liked was Washington getting Diami Brown. I think he was potentially a 2nd round receiver on my board, and he went middle of round 3, I think. And I think what he offers downfield, particularly when you've got Fitzmagic throwing you the ball, I think it could be, because Terry McLaurin needed a bit of support in that offense, and I think he's got the potential there to really do that. And then, like you said, round day 3, Michael Carter we've already touched on.
Another North Carolina. Diami Brown was in North Carolina. We just love North Carolina, I think.
Well, they were a really good offensive team last year, weren't they? It happens kind of sometimes, doesn't it? You get a bunch of players from the same offense. So he was a really good pick, dropping to round 4. I couldn't believe that. And then another one out of that round, Jabril Cox, the linebacker, in LSU, who went to Dallas. So obviously Dallas took Mike Parsons and then Jabril Cox in round 4. And potentially for me, that could be their starting linebacker at some point later this year, because, the two that they have at the moment.
We've got Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith, haven't they?
Jalen Smith and Vander Esch, they haven't looked that good. And I think there's every possibility that Cox can get snaps this year at linebacker for definite. So, I think he was 115 he went. So, great pick. You've already touched on Khalil Herbert. And then a late round wide receiver, I think he was the 2nd to last pick in the draft, Dax Milne, out of Zach Wilson's college.
Brigham Young, BYU.
Yeah, BYU. So Dax Milne was Zach Wilson's number 1 wide receiver at BYU. Had an outstanding year this year, obviously, as did Zach Wilson. So I was surprised that he dropped that far. I was expecting him to kind of go around 4, round 5. So I think, again, that was to Washington as well. So with Dax Milne and Diami Brown and Terry McLaurin, I'm looking forward to seeing what Fitzmagic can do. So they were some of my extra, picks that I liked.
I like it.
How about maybe the not so good, the dark side?
We'll rattle through this, shall we? We're 25 minutes in. We'll just do a few ones. I mean, let's not beat on the Raiders, but we'd be remiss not to mention certain pick at number 17 overall, Alex Leatherwood. He could go on to be an absolutely amazing tackle. We don't know, do we? And there is a bit of a school of thought that if Mike Mayock was still doing the mock drafts, he'd have been further up the boards because Mike Mayock would have mentioned him. But I'm not really buying it. We heard that when he took Cleveland Farrell number 4 in 2019. and he's not really amounted to much. Last year, him taking Damon Arnett in the first round. I think the Josh Jacobs pick has panned out. That's worked out. I think probably his best draft pick has been Max Crosby. I think it was in the third round, maybe Hunter Renfrow, who was in the fifth a couple of years ago. But Mayo's draft record isn't great at the minute, so yeah, let's not really beat up on them too much. You and I were having a bit of a conversation about, especially given the drama that had gone on with Aaron Rodgers. We were sort of texting when they were on the clock about, now let's play the game of, let's not give Aaron Rodgers a wide receiver, and then they go ahead and take Stokes at corner, which was just, again, I know, a mock I gave them Caleb Farley, so they definitely need help at corner, but that felt like a reach to me.
Massive.
A huge reach to me. So wasn't really too impressed with that. In terms of other bad ones, every single team that passed on Justin Fields for me.
Yep.
Every single team that passed on Justin Fields. I'll let you throw a few out there quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Justin Fields, the likes of Carolina and Denver who didn't take Justin Fields, they will.
Even the Lions.
Even the Lions, yeah, potentially even the Lions. I mean, just like we said, Justin Fields could be an absolute bust, but I'm not buying it, and I think he's not going to be worse in a couple of years than Sam Darnold or Teddy Bridgewater. He just isn't. So unless Denver do go out and pull the Rodgers trade off, I think they should have taken Fields. Simple as that. I totally agree on Eric Stokes. Also, the other Georgia cornerback, Tyson Campbell, went at the beginning. You guys picked him, didn't you? I'm not a massive
brilliant.
fan. I'm not a massive fan.
I'm joking.
Campbell either. I thought they were both picked way higher than they should have done, those Georgia cornerbacks. Didn't like those picks.
Apparently, we were taking calls on that pick, but we were absolutely zeroed in. Would not be moved. Wanted to take Tyson Campbell.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I don't get that. And the other one, just very quickly, that I wanted to throw out there was the wide receiver that was he their first pick? Seattle's wide receiver that they picked. Yeah, he was their first
Dwayne Eskridge.
Dwayne Eskridge. Now, some people liked him. He did have a bit of a buzz. I had heard his name mentioned, and he was getting routinely kind of mocked in round 2, round 3. I haven't seen it, and I kind of don't really see it. And
he's very, 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 very fast, basically.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, again, let's wait and see. But for me, that was a massive reach. There was some way better wide receivers. But was it any worse than the LA Rams taking Tutu Atwell in the same round? Jesus, that guy is going to be useless. So
I think I weigh more than Tutu Atwell, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I do some turds that weigh more than him, to be honest. He's absolutely tiny, isn't he? But yeah. And on that lovely note,
just one more actually. We'll give it 2 minutes. The Texans. What are they doing? They had very few picks in that draft after getting shafted by Bill O'Brien. Third round, they're there. There's still some good players on the board by my reckoning at this point. Some good players that went later on, and they take Davis Mills out of Stanford. I mean, I guess that tells you where their head's at with Deshaun Watson at the moment, but still such a reach. You could be using that third to trade for somebody later on. You could be stocking up to make it, if you do bring somebody in, if you were to say bring in, I don't know, a Jimmy Garoppolo, or if you bring in Gardner Minshew, do something like that. Davis Mills for me isn't ready to start anytime. I could see him maybe being a backup, but that would be, he's got Tom Savage written all over him for me as Davis Mills, but.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I was absolutely flabbergasted by that move. I think because at the end of the day, like you said, he's potentially not even ready to play at all. So I don't really see him even playing this year. And given their roster and the fact that they could be playing Tyrod Taylor at quarterback this year, they're going to be picking top 5, top 6 this year, almost guaranteed. And so you're telling me that they're not going to take a quarterback in the top 6 next year? Absolutely nonsense. In which case, what was the point in the pick? It's just a wasted pick. Nonsense.
To balance that out, I like them taking Brevin Jordan in the 5th. We took Luke Farrell just before him, and I think Luke Farrell's very much a blocking tight end. I'd have definitely had Brevin Jordan over, but I like them taking that. They didn't need a tight end, so just to give them some credit there.
Absolutely. So, so yeah, that kind of some of our takes on the draft. If anybody's listening and they have some other specific players, draft picks that they want us to comment about going forward or anything like that, feel free to kind of get in touch either via Twitter or the email address. Yeah, feel free to do that. And then we wanted to move on now to the fantasy side of things, really. So we, as I mentioned before, touched on it. We've got our kind of fantasy draft coming up this weekend. So it's a rookie draft. We had our main, so it's a startup fantasy football league, which is a dynasty league that has in IDP as well, individual defensive players as well as offensive players. So we did our startup draft a few months ago. So we've all kind of got a base squad of about 28 players, I think it is. And now we're looking to do the rookie draft this weekend. So what I thought would be interesting is, and that's the reason why we're not going to be putting this podcast out straight away.
Because we know absolutely everything, and everybody would have copied off us. How arrogant are we, Mark? How big-headed are we?
But hey, if it means I don't get stiffed in the first round, then I'm all up for doing that. So
I mean,
so yeah,
there's no chance of me stiffing you because I don't have a first round pick.
We thought we'd kind of talk about the fantasy side of it, and I'm going to kind of put up on screen now my kind of positional rankings for those of you watching on YouTube, and we're just going to kind of have a quick chat through these rankings, really, and I'll talk on maybe why some players are higher than maybe they got drafted in the real draft, some players that I don't even have on my board, that kind of thing, and we'll just kind of chat about that, really. That's what we thought we would kind of do. So I'll just make that a bit bigger so you can see that. Is that looking all right on there? Yeah.
I might have to lean in a bit.
Let me see if I can. How's that look?
Beautiful.
So from a quarterback point of view, I think the talk in our league certainly was everybody seemed to be wanting to get to the top of the draft originally for Trevor Lawrence. My view from a fantasy point of view is that I have Fields and Lance ahead of him purely from the point of view of what they can do in the run game. And so I do have those ahead of him. I have Zach Wilson 4 and Mac Jones 5. Fields, as I touched on before, once he gets on, and bearing in mind this is a dynasty league we're talking about, so it's not a redraft league, so we're not talking about just this season. We're predicting for the future. I have Justin Fields as my number one quarterback. What do you sort of think about that, Rob?
I'll be honest. I have Trevor Lawrence as my number one quarterback, but that is massive home bias there. So I want it to work out. I think Lawrence's athleticism is somewhat underlooked. He's capable of leaving that pocket. He's capable of busting out some big runs. I think you might see Maya sort of utilising some of the college concepts. If the play isn't there, just taking off and using his athleticism. But yeah, I mean, I can't argue with Fields number one. It'd be were I to be after a quarterback. If I got either, I wouldn't be fussed. As we've said before, Trey Lance does scare me a little. But yeah, I think he is there, just as you say, just because of his athleticism. I think also
the 49ers. I think what he's going to, what the playbook that he's going to have, and the way that Shanahan,
and the support he'll have, and the run game he'll have. I mean, the Niners loaded up on running backs. We didn't touch on them in the draft, but they took Trey Sermon, who I really liked, and they also took Elijah Mitchell in the 6th, who I had as a bit of a sleeper that I was going to be looking to pick up, but he's just going to be buried on that depth chart now. You add him to Raheem Mostert, you've got JaMychal Hasty, you've got a very crowded running back room, but you've got loads of support there for the quarterback. I think if Lance can sit behind Garoppolo for a bit as well, maybe, and learn, I don't think that's. I think that's quite a clever thing to keep Garoppolo on the books. So yeah, I'd have Lance 3rd, Fields 4th, Jones 5th. Yeah, not too dissimilar really. Just Lance maybe from the. Just like I say, a bit scattergun and the limited sample size. I'd take Lawrence's. Having been through high school and played, at top level, been through college, played at a top level, I just trust more in sort of what I've seen rather than what the potential is with Lance. Yeah. But yeah,
I get that. I think it's, for me, it's just the the potential and it's the offense that he's going to be running that sway me there. I totally agree with that. He could be an absolute bust. He may not, because we've both talked about it. His accuracy concerns and things like that. But I think the potential's there in that offense for him to be special. But certainly from a fantasy point of view, rushing touchdowns definitely. And the like. I think
you don't need to be good to be a good quarterback to be good in fantasy. Just look at Jameis Winston the other year. He was terrible, absolutely. But he was top 3 in fantasy.
Yeah. So moving on to running backs, I have changed these rankings. Well, pretty much all of these rankings have changed post-draft because, and we touched on this before, that the landing spot of the player does have an impact at the end of the day. And you'll see from my wide receiver 10, I think it is, when we touch on them, that he was somebody that would have been higher definitely earlier, but he's gone to the Ravens, for example. And I think that's happened with all of my positional rankings here. They've all been altered slightly from who they've been picked by, and that's altered my running back rankings ever so slightly. In that I now have Najee Harris number 1, purely because it is apparent that Pittsburgh consider the running back to be the problem, not the offensive line, and they're going to feed Najee Harris, and therefore he's going to get all the opportunity in the world to just run the ball 20, 25 times.
Yeah. Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland are not taking any carries away from the J. Harris.
No. So Harris is my number 1 running back. I then have Javonte Williams, who is personally my favorite running back. But the position there in Denver, I mean, it's not much worse, but I just think with the offense, all around offense that they've got, wide receivers and things like that, I don't think they'll be running it as much. I don't think the opportunities will necessarily be there as much. So he is my second running back. And then this is where people will probably freak out with my rankings. I have Carter ahead of Etienne because, again, I love Michael Carter. And I think
mine are identical, Mark, to that point.
Oh, really?
Absolutely, yeah. Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, and then
and then Travis Etienne for
Big Trav.
And then there's a bunch of running backs that basically what I've done with all of these picks is obviously I do not think that Kene Nwangu is the 6th best running back in this draft. I don't think that. But what I'm saying with my rankings is that I'm not interested in anybody else other than these 6 players. And therefore, I'm not interested in getting a Khalil Herbert in round 3 or 4 or 5 because I'll be looking elsewhere at that point. So my kind of premium running backs are the top 4 in these rankings: Harris, Williams, Carter, Etienne. And then I have Javian Hawkins, who's a bit of a sleeper, a mid-round pick potentially, who was at Louisville, who's gone to Atlanta, and it's not a great situation. It's a fairly favourable position.
He's only got Mike Davis ahead of him on the depth chart for me. I too have Javian Hawkins very high on my board, and I'm a little bit gutted to see him so high on your board, truth be told.
And then I'd say
I'd like to dig into Kene Nwangu. Just interested to hear why you would take him when there's Dalvin Cook there and also Alexander Mattison, who took quite a lot of carries last year.
Yeah, again, it probably won't be somebody I draft. Maybe he'll end up being somebody that I potentially target as an undrafted free agent if other things happen or whatever. But I've heard very good things about him in that he is very similar to Dalvin Cook and Mattison, because those two players are quite similar for me in the way that they run, and I've heard things that people are expecting Nwangu to take that RB2 position this season. So it's a bit of a flyer. I watched a couple of tapes of him and thought, that kid looks decent. So that's kind of why he snuck on there. But I certainly won't be drafting him, but he's on there to remind me to kind of, potentially give him a look in after the draft.
Yeah, he's not even on my board. I took him totally off my board. That's the reason I was interested.
I didn't know about him going in to the draft. It was after, when I've been listening to podcasts and people reviewing things, and that's when I became aware of him and looked into him during the week. So that's kind of where he sprung from. Anybody else?
The only one that I would add there, I think, Kenneth Gainwell, who Philadelphia took in round 5, I've got on my board. I think it's probably quite a good situation there. I'm not overly sold on Miles Sanders being the solution. I know they've got Jalen Hurts there at quarterback at the minute, so it's maybe not going to be the greatest offense in the world, but I think I'd be tempted to take a bit of a flyer on Kenneth Gainwell potentially later on. Just like I say, not really sold on some of the running backs they have already, and just a bit of a change. He's very good catching passes out of the backfield. You can see Jalen Hurts checking down quite a lot, so potentially picking up some plays there was my thinking.
Yeah, no, and I'm certainly aware of him, and he was on my original list. I think again, what I've done with some of this is I know where I'm going in rounds 1 and rounds 2.
Right. Okay.
I want a running back in round 1 or round 2, simple as that. And for me, he doesn't come into that element, so I've kind of trimmed him out because, yeah, I'm not interested in running back kind of rounds 3, 4, 5 probably. So
yeah, I mean, I'm thinking certainly those top 4 will be off the board very quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So then on to wide receivers. You can see I've for those kind of looking at the video here, I've got a number of wide receivers here. Fantasy seems to be that way. You get your premium running backs, and then wide receivers is where you get your real value, really. And so I've got a lot more on here than maybe you were expecting. So for me, the number 1 wide receiver, not going to change, particularly given that he went to Cincinnati and Jamar Chase, best wide receiver since Julio Jones the other week. I love him. Think he's going to be an absolute beast. Then I have Jalen Waddle at number 2, who went to Miami, hooking back up with Tua. Scares me a little bit because of my fear of Tua and the fact that I think ultimately he'll be a bust, but the relationship's there. And also I think he can be a bit of a gadget player who probably return some punts potentially, get him in the jet sweeps, that kind of thing. So I imagine that Waddle will have a decent season. And then my love for Elijah Moore shines true. He's my number 3 wide receiver. No surprise there for anybody listening or to yourself there, Rob. I then have Rondale Moore at number 4. And I think this is a bit of a stretch, but I love the potential of what Rondale Moore could be in Arizona. I think
definitely
outside of maybe the Saints or even the Chiefs, I think it's a really good landing spot for him. You've got their head coach. Again, the names just escaped me.
Where are we?
Arizona,
Cliff
Kingsbury. So obviously coming not too long out of college, and just the college concepts potential there, and the fact that he'll know very well what Rondale Moore can do. And I just think the potential's there. Outside of their main man,
Hopkins.
Yeah, outside of Hopkins, there's not a lot going on at wide receiver, in my opinion. I think
Christian Kirk hasn't really worked out. Andy Isabella, who they drafted a few years ago, we were expecting bigger things of, and it's not really done. So yeah, I think he slots straight in at number 2. I can see them giving him carries out the backfield as well. To be honest, they've got Chase Edmonds there and James Conner, I think, at the moment. So I can certainly see him employing some pretty funky.
As long as he stays free of injury, that's my only concern with him. Then I've got Terrace Marshall, who we know I was high on going in, but he's gone.
I was so similar, Mark. I'm not even joking. It's ridiculous. So there's ever so slight variations, but yeah, by and large, very similar.
So Marshall scares me a little bit that he's going to Sam Darnold, but again, I'm thinking longer term here. So there's the potential there for him to be really well. Someone who's shot up my board really is Amon-Ra St. Brown. He wasn't particularly high going in, but I think he's landed in a really favorable spot.
He's their number 1 wideout.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the potential is real there. And similarly with Josh Palmer, the Chargers. I didn't know that much about him going in either, but having watched some tape and again feedback from people, podcasts and stuff, I think he could be the number 2 there potentially.
And I trust Justin Herbert. I think Herbert had a great season last season. Surprised both you and I. We weren't particularly high on him. I remember last year chatting to you about. No. I think we thought the Chargers had taken Simmons at 5, and they proved us wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is the point, isn't it? You just don't know with quarterbacks.
You don't know, do you?
You just don't know. So then, quickly to run through the rest, I've got Diami Brown at Washington, who I touched on before. Then this is where I have Devontae Smith as my number 9 wide receiver. I'm just so scared of that situation, as well as potentially the issue with his weight and stuff. And people might say, well, you're being hypocritical here, Mark, because you're saying that it's more longer term and all that. Yes, it is, but there's too much there that scares me with Smith when you factor everything in. That I just think he doesn't. Yeah, he scares me a little bit. Then you have Bateman, who's landed in Baltimore, and then there's a couple of players then that have kind of crept onto my board purely because, again, of where they've landed. So Cornell Powell has gone to my Chiefs, and we are desperate for a number 2 wide receiver behind Hill. And obviously Sammy Watkins isn't going to be with us this year. I'm not a massive Demarcus Robinson fan. Mecole Hardman has not done enough for me since we took him a few years ago. So for me, if he comes in and plays well, Cornell Powell will be the number 2 wide receiver. And if you're going to be the number 2 wide receiver in the Chiefs, you need a look in. So I think that's why he's on my board. Fitzpatrick, it's the same. He could potentially be the number 2 wide receiver in Tennessee, with Corey Davis having gone, and then them losing their tight ends and things as well. I think there's potential targets there for Fitzpatrick. Des Fitzpatrick. And then Dax Milne, who I mentioned before, the BYU wide receiver who's gone to Washington, and then Tillon Wallace. I do like him, but again, he's in Baltimore, so he's just way too further down. And then I've got a couple there that at the end that potentially from an undrafted free agent point of view, Cade Johnson. He did go to Seattle, and I thought he's quite a good late round pick potentially. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit talking about UDFAs that have gone to Seattle. I was a big fan of Tamorian Terry, again, Florida State. Thought he's got some really quite different skill set. I was quite excited to see where he would end up, but the fact that he's gone to Seattle, the fact that they've taken Cade Johnson as well, and they picked Dwayne Eskridge, he's maybe somebody that I'd look at during the season, but I don't think the opportunity is going to be there for him.
No, he could very well end up being somebody, like you said, that you keep an eye on, you pick up mid-season, because he actually turns out to be the better of the 2 or 3 that they end up taking. Yeah. So every chance.
Just go back to Elijah Moore. I mean, I love him as well, and I'm a massive fan. The only thing that doesn't scare me, and obviously, like we said, this is a longer term view, but they picked up Corey Davis. They've got Denzel Mims as well. They've got Jamison Crowder. They've got they've got probably a top 3 there. I mean, I'm assuming that Moore's talent will shine through, and he'll emerge in the slot for them, and he'll get a lot of targets. But that's the only downside on that. But yeah, certainly in the longer term, he's
I mean, my view there, I totally understand what you're saying. My view there is that Davis and Mims are your outside receivers, and I think although potentially Moore would probably like to be an all-rounder, and people have certainly said that they think he could potentially play outside, he's destined for the slot early doors at least, and I think there's an opportunity definitely there for him. And again, it's longer term, like you say, and will Mims get a second contract? Who knows? There's all sorts of things there, and again, I'm just kind of a bit in love with him, to be fair, so he was always going to be top 3. Anybody that I haven't got on in my wide receivers that you have?
I think, like I say, this seems like I've done absolutely nothing for this, but no. I mean, Anthony Schwartz I thought was interesting. He went to Cleveland in the 3rd round. They're not exactly blessed with wide receivers, so he's on my board. Not particularly high up my board, but he's on there. He's a speedster. He's a bit of a deep threat. Not that Baker tends to throw it deep that often, but I think we touched upon it in the mock pod. They've got Jarvis Landry. They've got Beckham coming back off an injury, and then outside of that, you've got Rashard Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Nobody that really fills you with any sort of. I don't think they're going to be amazing. So I think there's a possibility that taking Schwartz, especially in the 3rd, taking him quite high there, I think he could carve out a role certainly in future. So he might be one I'll take a bit of a flyer on in the later rounds potentially.
Cool. So moving on to tight end, I think this is interesting, and this is probably where there'll be most of the variance, I think, in terms of offense, because I have a very limited number on my board. I think I've just got four tight ends here. No surprise. Kyle Pitts, number 1, of course.
We don't have to talk about it.
I'm not going to get him in the draft. I pick at number 6 for those of you listening. And Rob, you originally picked.
I was originally picking up 5. I traded up to 2. And then Tom went ahead of me, and he's definitely taken Kyle Pitts number 1. So if anybody now, well, it'll be too late by this point, but Kyle Pitts is going number 1 to Tom's team. So I've made peace with that, which is why I then traded back out and picked up some quite a lot, well, a significant number of firsts next year. So
yeah. So Pitts will be gone by both of us, so it's kind of irrelevant in being on the board, really. But then I have Pat Freiermuth as the only other tight end that I'm willing to take semi-early. I'm not interested in anybody else other than Freiermuth, and I probably won't be taking him until round 3, round 4, if he falls there, which I don't expect him to. And I do have somewhat of a need at tight end, so I'm kind of miffed that there isn't more talent in this draft, to be honest. But
Austin Hooper's available if you want
him. So I kind of have Pitts and Freiermuth there at the top, and then I've got a couple of other players. And again, one here, Noah Gray, Kansas City. I didn't know too much about him. I was aware of him, but I didn't watch that much tape going into the draft. I've watched some stuff since, and I think there's definitely a skill set there. Obviously, he's going to be behind Travis Kelce, but we've touched on this before, if not on the pod, certainly when we've been chatting before, that Kelce isn't going to be around forever. As much as it hurts me to say that, we need to start thinking about a replacement. And Noah Gray has something of the skill set that Kelce has. He's not as big, he's potentially not quite as fast, but his route running looks pretty decent. And I think he's certainly a willing blocker. He's not the best blocker in the world, but he's willing to. He sticks his head in there all the time. So I think, if he can improve that side of his game and become a true kind of dual threat tight end, I think there's potential there for him. Then Kenny Yeboah is an interesting one for me, who I expected to get drafted, who didn't. Who's gone to the Jets as an undrafted free agent. And again, their tight end room doesn't look great. So there's potential.
Chris Herndon, haven't they?
Yeah, so real potential that he could latch on there. So again, Gray and Yeboah are people that I'll be looking to potentially target late in the draft, rounds 5, round 6 potentially. And then there was an interesting player, Miller Forrestall, who was the Alabama tight end that again went to Tennessee. They don't have any decent tight ends really now, having let their top 2 tight ends go in the offseason. So I just thought, purely from the point of view of playing time there, that he's somebody to just keep an eye on.
Apologies, talking over you there. I was just, Yeboah's an interesting one. I too thought he would get drafted, and he didn't. I can say, call this a bit of a prognostication, if you will, but I can see Zach Ertz ending up on the Jets this year. I don't know why, but it just feels right to me. It feels like they will trade for a veteran and they'll get Zach Ertz in there to bolster it. But before I was quite high on him, I don't have him on board. One that I do have on that I'd mentioned to you probably a couple of months ago now, and you hadn't heard of him, was Trey McKitty. He was initially at Florida State. He transferred to Georgia. I was very high on him. I wasn't, if I'm honest, expecting him to get drafted. I was expecting him to be late around, and the Chargers picked him up in the 3rd. And they have a needed tight end as well. So he's one that I'm probably going to take quite early, and probably earlier than I need to, just because I really rate him and I liked him a couple of months out. I was hoping I could just pick him up right at the end of the draft, but I don't really want to take that chance now. I'm pleased to see he's not on your board at least. But if it comes to ADP, and if somebody looks and goes, "Oh, this team took a tight," I've never heard of him, but they took him in the 3rd. He must be good. So I just want to guard against that. So I'm probably going to take him quite early, just because he might amount to nothing, but I just want him to be sat on my taxi squad, just so he's there. So he'd be another one that I would take.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, like you say, the worst thing that could happen is you're somebody who, you find a guy, you think, oh my God, I love him, and then you, for whatever reason, don't end up taking him, and then he becomes what you kind of were thinking he would, and you didn't take advantage of that. So I totally get that.
So I don't care if I end up taking him. I don't know. I pick at 21st. I probably won't take him there, but if I did, I'd be okay with that, because I want him. And if he doesn't pan out, he doesn't pan out. But that's kind of fine. I did once fall in love with Amir Abdullah. I was very high on Amir Abdullah coming out of college, and he amounted to absolutely nothing.
So was I. He had a really good rookie season, from what I remember, and then because he was getting fed the ball all the time, I think, and then
just
he kind of just faded away, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think is he stuck in the Minnesota back room now?
He was in Minnesota.
And so that's kind of all the skill positions. And then obviously we, as I said, we do an IDP league. So we do have defensive players. Now, my board is very limited on defensive players. One, because they're so hard to predict, and especially as rookies. But also there'll be a focus from the people in our league, I think, more towards offensive players than defensive players. So there's the likelihood is that not as many defensive players are going to get drafted, which is why I only have a couple of DBs and a couple of defensive linemen on my list. And then I've got about 5 or 6 linebackers. So no surprise that I've got Ojulari as my top edge player in defensive lineman. And I've also got Kwity Paye on there. I wasn't particularly high, but I think he's gone to a really good position and he's going to see the field early. So if he does play well, there's the potential there for him to be, to be in a really good position. So those are the only 2 on my board. Jalen Phillips I was going to put on, but realistically, again, I'm just worried about the injury, and I'm probably not going to pick a defensive lineman in the draft realistically anyway, unless Ojulari's still there in round 4, 5, 6, maybe. Because that's probably where I'm going to start looking outside of linebacker. I probably won't look for a defensive lineman or a DB before round 4. So yeah,
I'm very similar, Mark. To be honest, I don't know where I'm going to take them. To be honest, I think as we said earlier, linebacker is probably the premium position. Edge, as you know, I'm higher on Jalen Phillips. I agree his injury is a concern. I'd possibly take him around 5 or 6. Depending who else is available. Linebacker wise, JOK is my number 1 linebacker, followed by Zaven Collins, followed by Michael Parsons. But it's fairly interchangeable, to be honest. And DB, I too have Andre Cisco top, just from some of his highlights that I've seen. I mean, I think he's feast or famine, really.
Yeah,
he got a lot of interceptions, but also he let a lot of people through. So it just depends on how he makes the step up.
He's Marcus Peters at the safety position for me.
Okay.
He's gonna give you picks. He's gonna get picks, and from a DB perspective, that's what you need. You need the splash players.
Absolutely.
You don't get hurt in fantasy if he gives up 3 touchdowns in a game.
It doesn't matter, does it?
If he makes 3 picks in a game, he's stellar. This is why we've said before, it's pointless having the number 1 corner in the league from a fantasy point of view, because he's not going to get thrown at. Cisco can sit back there and give away all the plays he wants as long as he makes a couple of picks. I'm happy. So that's
totally agree.
And then from a linebacker point of view, I think we touched on it in our mock that I wasn't particularly high on Nick Bolton, and then obviously the Chiefs picked him. I think I'm not going to go back on my word. I don't think he's the most talented linebacker in this class by any means. However, he is by far the best linebacker in our squad. And so he's going to see the field from day one, and he could be an absolute monster from a fantasy point of view, because he's going to play, he's going to get tackles. I expect him to play early and play well in that defense. So that's why he's made the board. So I have Parsons, Collins, Bolton, Jamin Davis, JOK, and then Jabril Cox, touched on him before. I like him. LSU linebacker that's gone to Dallas. So that's kind of what my defensive players look like.
Yeah, very similar all in all, though, to be honest.
Yeah. Cool. So that's kind of what it looks like. So it'd be interesting to see how many of these end up on our teams after the week.
We can do that next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a case of reviewing it next week, isn't it? We'll probably do that next week. I don't think there'll be too much in the way of NFL news next week ahead of the release schedule. That's kind of the next big thing, I guess, that we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks, maybe. We can review the NFL schedule when that comes out. I think it's the 12th of May. Is that right?
It's memory next week, isn't it? So.
Yeah. So that kind of rolls up that section. Do you want to do your whinge of the week? Pick one of your.
I'll do one more draft nugget. Zach von Rosenberg, the millionaire punter that I mentioned on the couple of weeks ago. He has signed as an undrafted free agent with Minnesota. He'll be competing with Britton Colquitt for the starting job. So watch out for punter battles at the Vikings. Let's see who emerges on top.
Tune in pre-season for that battle.
Punter Club. That's going to be a new feature. We'll be marking that battle out week by week by week. It's the one everybody's keen on. Whinge of the week. I did have many whinges. I've already sort of touched upon one. I'm just going to get them both out there. We'll wrap up because we've just gone over an hour and we said this would be a short one. And we never do that.
No.
So very quickly, first whinge of the week. There was a rule change so that basically to relax the numbers that players can wear on their jerseys. So read into it if you will. I'm not going to go into all the detail on it, but the amount of hand wringing and Tom Brady coming out going, how do I know who I'm meant to be blocking? I'm not going to know who's coming. You're a professional footballer, you're a professional quarterback. They're going to be the ones that are running at you. Don't look at the number on their shirt. Just get on with it. Stop trying to make excuses up. So that wound me up. So I'm going to whinge about that. And then the other one was Mark has actually told me that Roger Goodell pronounces one correctly pre-show, but I'm going to go with it anyway because it wound me up. Roger Goodell and his pronunciation of certain players' names, who did it when Marcus Mariota got drafted and he called him Marcus Mariotto. There were numerous examples in this draft, but Travis Etienne annoyed me. That makes it sound like his last name is the letter E, the letter T, and the letter N. It isn't. Think of the place in France, Saint Etienne. That's how it should be pronounced. Apparently, Travis Etienne pronounces it Etienne. He's also an idiot. End of whinge.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the ETN thing, I do get what you're saying about Goodell. He does tend to get things a little bit weird when I don't think he got Tua's name right when they drafted him last year. Right?
Tua.
Tagovailoa.
Nice.
So I'm pretty sure he messed that up, and he often does it. So I totally get that. Outside of the ETN, and you should just, when you get your Clemson jersey, you should just get ETN on the back. Maybe.
Yes, it'll save me some money.
Or your Jags jersey, yeah. With regards to the numbers, I get it. I mean, people they seem to have a. Well, I suppose I'm being a little bit hypocritical here myself, because when I played sort of Sunday league football, people said it's 1 to 11, just crack on with it, and you get given 11, and I'm like, I don't want to wear number 11. It's like, why? It's just a number, you don't even see it. What's the problem? And I'd kick up a fuss playing up front, and I wasn't prepared to wear the number 10 jersey or the number 9. I wanted the number 5 to play up front because of Milan Baros, my favourite Liverpool player.
Yes.
So I get the numbers thing, to be fair, and I probably would be with Brady whinging about it. So I'm going to stick up for him there. First time I've ever stuck up for Tom Brady.
I was going to say, yeah.
Right. So as you said, we've already gone over an hour. Having said we were going to limit this to 45 minutes, so we will call it a day there.
I mean, it was all gold, though. All gold. That.
Absolutely gold. And for those
Brilliant.
People in our fantasy draft, look who you should have picked. Oh, shocking. Anyway,
yeah, Girth, what were you thinking?
What were you thinking drafting Leatherwood in the first round?
Oh, Little John. I think Adam got it.
Sorry, Girth. Anyway, with that fourth down conversion, we will call it a day here, and we will see you next time on the Fourth and Whinges podcast.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.